words of wisdom, Gyan Ganga, on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. As you know, we beam this program alive across the globe on our various social media channels. And today we have a very important discussion with Dr. Subramanian Swamy and Professor MD Nalapat. Our topic for today is new ramifications of the Afghan situation for India. And I would now be requesting Dr. Swamy to make the introductory remark. But before that, I want to tell our viewers that this program, which we started in April 2020, we have now reached 124th episode today. And last Sunday, we had a very 123rd episode where Dr. Swamy discussed the Tamil Nadu temple under siege, the way out. And I thank our viewers across the globe in 121 countries for the viewership of 1,66,912. So it has been a big response, which members and our viewers from across the globe have been giving us on our Virat Hindustan Sangam. I owe it to the viewers for their support they extend to Virat Hindustan Sangam and Dr. Swamy. Today, as you know, a very important discussion where Professor Nalapat, who holds a PhD in economics and who teaches at the Manipal University, is going to enlighten us on the subject. He is an expert on foreign affairs and security issues. He is a journalist associated in the past, holding important roles in the Times of India, Mathrubhumi, and other journals across the country and abroad. And he regularly writes for the Sunday Guardian, and he is advisor on the News X channel. His columns are syndicated on various international publications. He has appeared in our show in the past, and we welcome him to our show. And with these words, I have to thank my co-host, Professor Arvind Chaturvedi from Delhi, and Ramesh Swamy, and our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, Rakesh Gadgi, and Swaminathan for their support to put this weekly program together. So with this introduction, it is over to Dr. Swamy to tell us about the topic of our discussion, and then he will have his conversation with Professor MD Nalapat. Over to Dr. Swamy.
Thank you, Jagdish. The topic is very, very fast developing, and so we may have to have more sessions after this also on the new ramifications. At the moment, what has happened in the last 10 days is unprecedented, unexpected. The United States originally had said that they are going to pull out their troops mostly by September 11. Then they changed it to August 30th. And then suddenly on the 15th of August, the Taliban just walked into Kabul and took over the presidential palace. And the night before, the then President Ghani just disappeared. He took a plane and went off. So today there is no formal initiation of any government, but Taliban is in control. And Taliban has many allies and branches. They have a branch in Pakistan, which mostly survived after the American attack in 2002. And first new ramification is that Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. And they have taken it over in every district except perhaps the northern part, where a force which is called originally called Northern Alliance is actually an all India Afghanistan organization, and it's headed by a very charismatic leader's son who was, the father was assassinated. Masood, his name was. And Taliban sent journalists with cameras to to take his interview. He was fooled into giving it. And as soon as he sat down for the interview, he was through the camera, he was shot dead on the spot. And now his son has grown up in these many years, and he is taken over, and he's put, he's secured the area where he is, and he has been joined by other people. One of them is Amrullah Saleh, who's a well-educated person, very articulate, and he has other people also. So about 5-6 people are in there, and they are holding out, and the Taliban has been trying to talk to them, but they are not listening. So this is a group we had supported earlier. In fact, I remember many years ago, in I think it was 80s and 87 or 88, when Masood's people came to Delhi, and they met many of us. And but they have been very well disposed to India, and India has helped them. So now the question, new ramification which has to be answered is, do we help them fight the Taliban? So that takes us to the question. So far, India has not taken any stand. Not only that, India has been left out of everything. The Americans formed a quad, as they call it, which consisted of China, Taliban, and Pakistan. And of course, they had Russia also there. So this was one quad, but India was not invited. India was nowhere in the picture. Of course, both Doval and Mr. Jaishankar made trips to Qatar as if they are big invitees, but they were kept waiting till everything was decided. Then the Russians also had a quad in which they invited the Americans, the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the Taliban, and again India was not invited. Now, India technically is a neighbor of Afghanistan, because the POK, which is not in our control but in Pakistan's control, has a border with Afghanistan. So, and we have long association right from Mahabharat. The Dhritarashtra's wife came from Kandahar, and so did Shakuni come from a part of Afghanistan. So it has been part of India, and Maharaja Ranjit Singh, in fact, had completely secured it. But then the British played a trick with him, and unfortunately, he died soon, and his son was completely taken over by the British, and he was brought up as an Englishman and that sort of thing. And Kohinoor, for example, was taken from the son by telling him that he should give a present to to Queen Victoria, and that's how Kohinoor went away from us. So I'm saying basically that if there's any one country which has ever defeated Afghanistan, and that is India, and that time had happened in Ranjit Singh's time. Now the question is, what stand we're going to take? Right now, we haven't said a word. There's been no policy statement on the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. We haven't said a word. There have been all kinds of statements made which are ridiculous. For instance, our foreign minister said, we'll wait and see. Now, what do you mean wait and see? Every day something is developing. It's like somebody takes the pin out of a hand grenade and throws to you, and you catch it, and somebody asks you, hey, what are you doing catching it? He said, I'm waiting to see what will happen. Now, of course, the grenade will burst and you will be dead in that. So we have yet to define a position. And since Nalapat is well clued into our policy making without being a member of the policy making team, but he is knowledgeable, he has friends, so we have invited him. He is considered very highly by everybody as an expert on strategic matters. And so before I turn it over to him, I'd like to make 2-3 more comments, which I hope Nalapat will address, and then If in the middle he feels I should intervene on anything, he can easily ask me to, but we will not interrupt him unless he asks for an interruption. Now, India's contribution has been in what we call as in economic and social development, and has been there from right from 2002 till this 2021. And it was in terms of buildings, the parliament building we built, library we built, so many things we have built, and not only in Kabul but in almost all the provinces of Afghanistan. We have, for example, built a highway, a huge highway, and must be the expertise of our Gadkari, but we built a lovely highway which is called Zarang Kelaram Highway, and we drafted their constitution or helped drafting their constitution. In education, we have allowed or given scholarships to so many Afghanistanis, and many of them had even earlier taken a degree from India. For example, Karzai, who was president for the longest period, he got a degree from Himachal University. And Abdullah was foreign minister and later the president. He too was educated in India. So, I mean, the connections with them is very strong, and therefore we should not move away from our responsibility. So, what's going on is that there is a debate, it appears to me, in the country whether we should make up with the Taliban. Now, how do you make up with the Taliban? Mr. Nalapat will have to tell us. They are a terrorist organization. But just because they occupied power, we can't overlook the fact. Idi Amin got power, but the Israelis never accepted him as a non-terrorist, and they treated him like that. And so I would say that our government seems to be confused whether we should make up with Taliban or not make up with Taliban. But Taliban is with Pakistan. And in fact, most of the sanctuaries in the past have been provided by Pakistan. Pakistan is the one that's rejoicing today. And they are everywhere. They are the ones who told the Americans, you please leave, we will take care. And now there's no one to make them accountable. So how do you make friends with Taliban when, first of all, it's an Islamic country, there's an extremist Islamic country that is Taliban wants it to be, and there have been long associations with Pakistan. Even Osama bin Laden was protected for a maximum of a period before the pressure of the Americans became so much that ultimately he was betrayed, and Taliban and Osama bin Laden was shot dead. So frankly, this reality check is not being done by any part of the government. All the time it's all hope. We are going to talk to them, we are doing this, we are doing that, we are waiting. One of the most ridiculous statements of the external affairs minister is, we are waiting and we'll wait and see how things develop. There's no room for wait and see. Every day development is taking place, and you are the loser in that. So I would say, first of all, I would ask Mr. Nalapat, what do you think we should do? Do you think what we are doing right now is okay, or we should be doing something else? So please tell us what you think. Second is the Chinese. They are fully into it, and in a very clever way. Just before the Taliban moved into into Kabul, a delegation, including the one who is now going to be made the president of Afghanistan, they went to China and they stayed 3-4 days there. They were looked after, a full discussion. And so for economic development of Afghanistan, I'm sure that the Chinese will use it fully, because particularly the fact that they've got also the border that road which they're planning to build right up to Gwadar port in Arabian Sea. So the Chinese are in fact a very quiet but highly successful in the way they have penetrated Afghanistan. So I don't think that we have a chance with enmity with China, with Pakistan, which has a visceral hatred for us, and then Taliban, which the first thing they said is what, Emirates or something, Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan is going to be the new name for Afghanistan. So I would say, let us make up our mind. Just before I came to this show, I was surprised to hear that India, which is now the chairman of two bodies. One is the Security Council. That's only for a month. It's by rotation. This is the 8th time it has happened. We are, of course, our media and all that playing it out as it was a great achievement, and our world leader has successfully got us this. But this is basically for a month and probably expire at the end of this month. And what that chairman has done today is accepted a modified resolution, which has probably been adopted by the time we are talking here, and it is quite different in one substantive matter from the resolution draft prepared by India. When India prepared its draft on the 16th of or 17th of August, excuse me, no, not 17th, it's here, 14th of August, it said that Taliban and its the terrorism of the Taliban and any other group connected with it must be ended. This is what this original resolution said. The resolution which has just come out today has completely deleted that, and we are now left with the Afghan group or individual should be allowed to be terrorists. Now, that is, you have no more, you're given a chit that Taliban is not a terrorist organization. Well, then what is a terrorist organization? So, in short, what I'm saying is we have no Afghanistan policy. That is surprising because we have spent so much money on, of course, constructive work and earned the respect. The international polls were taken over the last 20 years about 5 times, and all of the time India was on the top of the most popular country for the Afghans. Naturally, you got education from here, you got medicine from here, you got hospitals from here, you got a parliamentary system from here, so many things. So people are happy when they come here, we make them feel at home. So Afghanistan as a people who are not terrorists, who are not connected with the drug mafia, who is not connected with Pakistan, they are for India, and they like India's democratic freedom. They like our, the fact that women have the right to get employment and be elected to office, even become chief ministers, prime ministers, so on. So, in this circumstance, are you going to sacrifice Afghanistan to Taliban, or you're prepared to fight? Now, everybody scares, fight, why should we fight there? Why should we fight? If you don't fight there, you may have to fight here. Because if Taliban secures itself and stabilizes itself, it can come to POK, which means our border very soon. I mean, our the non-Kashmir border too. If they come to Pakhtunistan, they will come to Lahore, and then they are again on the borders. So one side you have the Chinese, one side you have the Taliban, the other side you have the Pakistanis. I mean, it's a hair-raising national security scenario, and unless we plan, we may be in great difficulty and lose the whole of Kashmir also. And in the meantime, the Chinese might do something in the northeast, and then of course Ladakh. All these things, they paint a very grim picture. So how to see through all this maze? We have got someone, we can't find a better person to call here, and he very readily agreed. We thank Professor Nalapat to please enlighten us. What is our policy? If you can't discover our policy, what should be our policy, and how do we go forward on Afghanistan from now on? Over to you, Professor.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say, Dr. Swamy, that I have nothing to do with government whatsoever, but I'd like to point out that China did something very interesting. About a month and odd ago, it appointed a second ambassador to Afghanistan along with
Yeah.
the existing ambassador. So you had an ambassador to the Ashraf Ghani government, and then you had a second ambassador, very senior person. In fact, he was more senior than the ambassador to the Afghan government, headed by Mr. Ghani. The ambassador to Taliban was an even more senior diplomat from the Chinese foreign ministry, and they appointed an ambassador to the Taliban. So I think the Chinese knew very well what was being planned in Afghanistan, certainly by Pakistan and their friends in Afghanistan. I'm not sure if the United States knew it or did not know. I'm not, because let's put it this way: if Biden represents the wisdom of the United States, then it is difficult to know what Biden knows and what Biden doesn't know, and what Biden doesn't know, he doesn't know, and knows what he doesn't know. Let's put it that way. But it's to say amazing that you have a country which has appointed two ambassadors. Let's say tomorrow the Chinese appoint, all right, we have an ambassador in Delhi, but that is ambassador to the government, which is a BJP government, headed by a BJP prime minister and BJP ministers. Let us appoint a government for the Congress party. So let us have a ambassador to the Congress party, and that, of course, with ambassador will be a more senior person. Well, I don't think that the government of India, Dr. Swamy has got some views on the government of India, but I don't think that that kind of Gandhian, if I may say so, forgiveness will go to that level. And if they were to appoint a formal ambassador to the opposition party, then I think any government would react, no matter which the government. So the Chinese knew for some time what is cooking in Afghanistan. They were well aware of it, and it is not a surprise because they provided many of the ingredients in the kitchen, and they were there in the kitchen. And some of the key chefs, the Pakistan military chefs, of course, are under their control and their supervision. So this is something which is very, very, important to point out, that you have a country, a member of the United Nations, a member of a country which keeps talking about diplomatic protocol and international norms, appointing an ambassador to an entirely different group, and that to a group that's been in armed conflict with the legal government of Afghanistan for decades. Armed conflict. So, forget about the Congress party. Let us say the Chinese, have set up an ambassador to the Maoists of India, the what we call the CPIML, the Communist Party of India, Marxist Leninists. That is the formal term. They are called Naxalites in common parlance. So you have a very senior Chinese diplomat as ambassador to the Naxalites. Well, that's exactly what they did, because the Taliban are, in a sense, the Maoists or the Naxalites or the insurgents of Afghanistan. So the Ghani government did not protest. Frankly, if I were Ashraf Ghani, I would have told the Chinese ambassador to go packing back to Beijing and send this other ambassador also packing back to Beijing from Kabul. Mr. Ghani, obviously, he's a man who is a very forgiving man. He is forgiving a lot of sins, including, I think, in himself. So nothing of the kind happened. So far as the UNSC resolution is concerned, Dr. Swamy, let us be very blunt. The reality is the United States, the UK, France, Germany, all these NATO powers and so-called allied powers that have got troops in Afghanistan, their only objective is to ensure that their own people do not fall victim to that conflict. That no body bags go back from who are American or British or German or whatever. That is their only objective in Afghanistan, and has been their objective for quite some time. I mean, there is a lot of talk about building democracy, building institutions, defeating terrorism, defeating the Taliban. Yes, that could be maybe, if you have 1 to 10 objectives, 1 to 9 is force protection. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made that very clear after these 13 US soldiers were killed in Afghanistan. Poor Joe Biden ran away from Afghanistan thinking he will save the lives of US soldiers, and he will go down in history as the US president under whose watch nobody died in Afghanistan who was an American citizen. Biden, this particular fragment of a terror group, and they're all, frankly, as you very well know, they're all part of one collective. I mean, they go by different names, but they're one collective. Poor Biden could not have that distinction. At least 13 Americans have perished under his watch, and I'm not sure. I hope they will be the last, but I'm not certain about that.
Can I interrupt you here?
Please,
Can I interrupt you here?
Please go ahead.
Why would China, which is a very well-developed country, it's not an illiterate fly-by-night government that has just suddenly come to power, why would they appoint 2 ambassadors at the same time? I mean, what was the thinking? Can you guess?
Well, I think it's very pragmatic thinking that they believe the Taliban was going to take over power in Afghanistan. It was inevitable. And they wanted to be basically on the right side. Because, as you know, Afghanistan is one of the biggest sources of rare earths.
This happened when Ghani was still president.
Absolutely, very much so. And there was no question of the Taliban taking over. Even many of the towns that subsequently took over.
Yeah.
Forget about Kabul. Forget about the government. It was way before all that happened. And they had appointed, at that point in time itself, I had pointed out, I think on television, a most unusual move to appoint a formal, I'm not talking of an informal ambassador. You have this track 1.5, track whatever. This is absolutely a more senior diplomat than the ambassador to the government of Afghanistan was appointed by China as the ambassador to the Taliban. The UNSC resolution, let me say, Dr. Swamy, I don't believe the United States or Britain or Germany or, any of these countries would have wanted to mention the Taliban, because they're all desperately trying to ensure that they do not lose their lives. Now, the Americans have lost 13 lives. Joe Biden must be frantic that not one more American should perish on his watch. He must be frantic, poor man. You could see the fact that he is frantic by the way he has run away from Afghanistan, but now he must be doubly frantic. Boris Johnson must be frightfully frantic. And I use the word frightfully advisedly. Merkel and everybody else will be frantic. They don't want anybody back to come back to either.
So what you're saying is that if everybody is going to agree to take the terrorist label from Taliban, India has no alternative but to go along. India is not going to be expelled from the UN if we took a stand. No, they are a terrorist organization, or they're supporting terrorist organizations, which is the truth. So why didn't India take that position that, I'm different?
Dr. Swamy, I am outside the government, and therefore I agree with you that, very frankly, we should basically do what we are well known for doing, and that is stand up to terror and basically oppose. And the Taliban, frankly, is an organization with which India cannot have any kind of a reasonable truck. Although, may I say that the Taliban itself is composed of 6 factions. 2 of them are controlled by Pakistan. 1 is controlled by China. If you remember, you tweeted this. And 3 of them are what I call free Pashtuns. So you have 3 captive Pashtuns. 2 of these 3 groups are in the captivity of the Pakistan military. 1 of them in the captivity of China. And the Pakistan military is in the captivity of China. So essentially, all these 3 are directly or indirectly captives of China. But 3 are free Pashtuns. So the Taliban itself is a little bit of a complex organization. But I want to point out something. Number one, I don't believe the Americans or anybody else, they would have been comfortable, frankly, with including the Taliban. And it's quite possible that they told us, for heaven's sake, please don't embarrass us. Please don't make us vote against your resolution. So get it through. And possibly that was the right decision. I'm not in government. I don't know what goes on in government. So possibly because from their benefit of being insiders, and I'm an outsider, so I have a different view. My view is you put your mark clearly and frankly and tell the world what you stand for, which is that you're against terrorism and you're not afraid to stand up against terrorism. But maybe if you're in government, you have other factors, other information, and you don't do it. But I want to tell you something.
One last interruption. One last interruption
Why
before you
not?
go to another point,
Why
and that
not?
is this: that the Americans, when they had the Quad meeting for Afghanistan, they didn't include India. So why you have to listen to American plea on this?
Look, frankly, Quad, Squad, Trad, Bad, none of these meetings are going to achieve anything. The Afghan
So
tragedy is going, it is a tragedy foretold. I mean, some people have been tweeting what I have been writing way back in 2018 and all that, in which this kind of sequence of events was laid out. It's a tragedy foretold. These are meaningless meetings. The fact is that diplomats want to show that they're doing something. So they go in for meetings. They spend a lot of money on going to some resorts, having a nice time, alcohol, various other diversions, and then they produce statements. They have photo opportunities, and everybody thinks, my God, a lot of hard work is going on. A lot of hard work is going on with daubing the paint off your face after you get off television and putting the paint on your face and possibly lipstick also, I don't know, when you're on television. But I can tell you, all this is a waste of time. I'm quite happy that none of the people in India who are officials were basically asked to join in this waste of time. Look, let me say something about the Khorasan project. The Taliban is at the core of the Khorasan project. And the Khorasan project, as you very well know, is the creation of an emirate, which they call an Islamic emirate. Actually, it's a Wahhabi emirate. And I would like to distinguish between a genuinely Islamic emirate and a Wahhabi emirate. This is what they want, is a Wahhabi extremist emirate that believes in violence, that believes, frankly, that if you do not belong to the Wahhabis, well, you don't really have a right to live. Or if you live, you'll have to live as a slave, not even as a dhimmi, which is as a submissive kind of human being, but as a slave, not even as a servant, as a slave. And that is the Wahhabi psychology. They want this Islamic emirate to spread across a very wide region. I don't think the Chinese leadership is aware. Large parts of China have been included in this Islamic emirate. Large parts of India have been included. The whole of Central Asia, the whole of Pakistan has been included. Large parts of Russia and Europe have been included. But don't forget, the original Crusades were in Europe. And these people say that the Crusaders from Europe, carried and won the war. Now we have to again beat the Europeans back. And the Europeans, they mean, people of European descent. So they mean the United States also, which is still majority of European descent. The Khorasan project, the Taliban is supposed to be the facilitator of the Khorasan project because Afghanistan is supposed to be the epicenter of the Khorasan project. Just as the Chinese Communist Party would like to make the PRC the Middle Kingdom once again, the epicenter of global geopolitics, the center point, if I may say so, of global geopolitics. The Taliban would like to make Afghanistan ruled by it the center point of this Khorasan emirate, which will spread across a huge area of Eurasia, Africa, finally North America, and which will be this. So from that point of view, the Taliban, all these 6 groups in the Taliban, and each of these groups may have some other groups, who knows? I mean, frankly, I can't track beyond a certain level. I presume government is tracking them, although government is very tight-lipped about what it is tracking and what it is not tracking. So I have no way of knowing what the government knows or what it does not know. All I know is what little I know. And I can tell you that these 6 groups are united. And what we call, ISIS or Daesh, whether it is ISIS K or A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, Y, Z, all these ISIS wings and all the wings of Taliban are united in supporting the Khorasan project. The, the difference is only one of tactics. I will, I am a member of Taliban. I say, let us be friendly with Dr. Swamy. I am, let us say, of a different group of Taliban, or I call myself ISIS. No, Dr. Swamy is horrible. Don't deal with him. Forget about Dr. Swamy. Write him off. Somebody else will say, no, maybe he's not so horrible. Why don't we have one more effort? That is the tactical move. The strategy is very clear. What Dr. Swamy says should not be allowed to happen. What we want to happen, which is opposed to what Dr. Swamy says, must happen. So the fact is, the strategy of all these groups in the Taliban is a strategy of the Khorasan project, a strategy of taking revenge on the Crusader. And who are the Crusaders? The European powers. And that includes the United States, Canada, poor Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, short of wearing a beard and dressed in a turban, I'm sure the poor man would like to be friendly with the Taliban, but I don't think he will get away from even the Canadian electorate if he does that. So we haven't yet seen Justin Trudeau in a beard and with a huge turban and dressed like one of the Taliban leaders. But the reality is that they're all supposed to be part of the Crusader group that has to be defeated. This is the Taliban philosophy. So, which is why, if you're talking about the Taliban as a long-term ally or as a friend, what you're saying is you are ready to roll over and give them victory in the Khorasan project. That's what you're saying, essentially, because they are not going to be diverted from that Khorasan project. They believe in it. And don't forget, Dr. Swamy, these are people who believe life begins at the grave. You and I are very clear, life ends at the graveyard. I mean, life ends at the cremation ground or whatever, and the Tower of Silence or whatever it is. But to them, life begins at the grave. And the paradise begins at the grave. And when do they get into paradise? If they implement the Khorasan project or if they are seen as implementing this Khorasan project. So that is what they're interested in. Eternal life in paradise. And that is through the Khorasan project. Given that mindset, people like Joe Biden and others and Boris Johnson, and not forget Boris Johnson, the army chief of Britain, Nick Carter. I mean, that poor man. I don't know if he can spell the word Taliban. I feel very sorry for the British. Thank God Nick Carter was not a general when Hitler invaded, because then all the British people would have been speaking German, I can assure you. You would not have had the English language. You would have had, courtesy Mr. Carter's idea of the world, you would have had the German language. So my point is very simple. I quite agree with you. The Taliban is incompatible with 21st century society, civilizational values. Now, frankly, I have a lot of respect for the United Nations organization. There are some parts of it that have not done too well, some parts like UNESCO that have done extremely well. But the reality is, there is such a thing called universal rights. There is such a thing as rights and freedoms that every human being should enjoy. And there is such a thing as a platform of universal values on which these rights are based. What you're talking about regarding the Taliban, they are completely contrary to any of these universal rights and values. So any of these leaders, they seem to be sincere when they say, oh, there's a new Taliban, new Taliban. All I can say, I am absolutely aghast at the degree of ignorance they have about the chemistry of this movement and the chemistry of the Wahhabis and the chemistry, very frankly, of this entire Khorasan project. And ISIS-K is the visible sign of that Khorasan project. ISIS-K has advertised itself as being for the project. But every single individual, every single Wahhabi, including those who are millionaires and zillionaires in Chicago, London, Berlin, Paris, New York, every one of them, if they are Wahhabis, they also believe in the Khorasan project. Let's be blunt about it. Now we turn out, then Dr. Swamy, frankly, I do believe that the Taliban are going to face a lot of problems. And I have been thinking, for example, today in Sunday Guardian, we have carried two lengthy pieces on the Panjshir Valley. I happen to believe, frankly, the whole negotiation with the Taliban faltered because they wanted.
Panji, no, just for our audience, you mean the Masood son junior?
I would like to say the son junior was an extremely brave man, exactly like his father, amazing human being, and I salute him. And Amrullah Saleh, the president of Afghanistan, because once Ghani ran away, with or without cash. If Ghani is living without cash, the poor man must be starving because the UAE is a pretty expensive place. It's not like India or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh. The UAE is a pretty expensive place. I've been there. I know you have to spend a fair amount of money in hotels and for food and all that. So this poor man must be doing really very badly if he has no money. But I presume he has some money, because otherwise he would not be, but whatever. What I want to say is, Amrullah Saleh, he represents the Afghan spirit. The Afghans love India. Afghan women in particular, they love India. Why? Because they are people of the 21st century. Young Afghans, young Indians, even, may I be so bold to say, young non-Wahhabi Pakistanis. They all understand the 21st century is a century in which different groups have got to live together, work together, and you can't afford to have religious extremism and exclusivism of any variety, including the Wahhabi variety. So I'd like to say I'm optimistic about the Afghan people fighting back. I would like to see India give them assistance. Possibly we are assisting them secretly because this government is doing everything secretly. I think they don't share information with anybody outside government. That includes me, definitely. I don't know what is going on inside government or what is not going on inside government. But I would like to hope that they understand the importance of ensuring that the Panjshiris prevail in this contest. Why? Because across Afghanistan, there are people who are in the 21st century, young Afghans in particular, women, Shia, moderate Sunnis, and Sunnis, moderate Sunnis. Sunnis are not Wahhabis. Unfortunately, the Western media keeps talking about Wahhabis as Sunnis. They're not Sunni. They're not even Muslim. They are a totally different kind of theology altogether, an extremist, exclusivist theology, and they can't live with anybody else. Unfortunately or fortunately, they cannot live with anybody else. But the reality of the situation is the Afghan people have started to fight the Taliban. And in Panjshir, if they prevail, and I really wish Ramesh and other friends in America will put some pressure on poor old Joe Biden. I thought Donald Trump was an idiot, but I don't want to mention what I feel about Joe Biden. But frankly, he's a disgrace to the human race. Forget about the United States. And he can redeem himself by doing something to support the Northern Alliance. Back in 1996, it was his good buddy, Bill Clinton, who basically gave a red carpet for Taliban to take over power in Kabul. In 2001, they repaid the United States with 9/11. Nobody has linked Clinton with 9/11. The real originator of the 9/11 fiasco was Bill Clinton and his decision to back the Taliban. And I can tell you, if there is another 9/11 in the United States, another mass terror attack on the US homeland, the originator will be Biden and this policy of running away in fear and fright from Afghanistan. So, look, I am in favor of US troops going away. I don't want US troops there. But US contractors, US logistics, US intelligence, US resources, and above all, Air Force support. All this is invaluable. All this is absolutely invaluable. And Joe Biden pulled the plug. And may I remind you, Dr. Swamy, this man is so ungrateful. He was casting all kinds of aspersions on the Afghan military. The
Yeah.
Afghan military was directly trained by NATO to have nothing under the knee except artificial limbs. They did not trust the Afghan military to have anything other than artificial limbs, which is NATO, below the knee. And let us say that you have got artificial limbs, you are challenged physically below the knee, and suddenly somebody takes those knees, those two, below the knee artificial limbs away from you, you may tend to fall. And that's what happened. It is the kind of training that NATO did to the Taliban, which frankly was and I have written this many times in the past, the first thing the Afghan army needed to do was forget about all the training of NATO, because it's absurd training. I mean, in this context, Jagdish and others talking a lot about, if I may say so, qualifications, and all of us have got multiple qualifications. The only qualifications I take seriously are BE, Bachelor of Experience, ME, Master of Experience, and DE, Doctorate of Experience. And it's not for us to say whether we are bachelors or masters or doctorates of experience. It is for others to look at us and say, well, what level we are. Of course, I know what you are, Dr. Swamy. You're a hyper doctor of experience. But I would only want to say one thing. These are people who have got tons of formal knowledge and zero common sense and zero intellect to understand what is going on. So a tragedy is unfolding before our eyes, and that tragedy has been caused by Joe Biden's cowardly decision to follow that other coward, that other ingrate, Donald Trump. Donald Trump betrayed the Kurdish people who stood by the Americans, who destroyed ISIS. And now you have got Biden again doing the same thing.
We have a short of time, and my colleagues want to ask questions. But before I hand it over to them, you see, this was about the ramifications. The one impression I got after listening to you about the European crusades and so on was that you were giving us the impression, whether you meant it or not is something you should clarify, that the Taliban is only going to be interested in chasing the Europeans and they will leave the Indians alone. Is that what you meant to say? Or if not, then how are they going to react to Indians in view of their being weaned up to this point by the Pakistanis?
Yeah, I'd like to say, Dr. Swamy, that my take on that situation is India is not the number one priority of the Taliban. It is the United States. It is Europe. There's no question about it.
Because but are we number two?
No,
are we number two priority?
No, may I tell you why? Because you don't get a CNN devoting wall-to-wall coverage if something happens in India. You get wall-to-wall coverage if something happens affecting the United States and Europe. CNN,
yeah, but
BBC.
What is the operational significance of what you're saying? Are you saying that we can relax? They will be busy with America and they're going to forget us?
We cannot relax because we have the Pakistan military. But the good news, or I don't want to call it the good news because it's a tragedy for Pakistan itself. The military is today facing increasing flak from within Pakistan. The military is, we call it a Wahhabi Punjabi military. It's actually a Potiawari military. A part of, I think, the northern Punjab, northern West Punjab, Potiawar. It is essentially a Potiawari dominated military, a very narrow ethnocentric base. And this military.
But you're not answering my question. What do we have? What do we do? Do we go on as if nothing has happened? That the Taliban is not going to be an issue for us?
You
tell us, how do we prepare against Taliban?
We very frankly, one, we do extensive diplomacy inside Afghanistan. We also help the people of Pakistan to liberate themselves from the clutches of the military. So the military goes back. We need a very active policy. I presume the Prime Minister, who has got a clear strategic vision, is doing all this, but clearly he's doing all this undercover. He's not doing it openly. And your friend Mr. Doval and must be doing it undercover, but I'm sure that kind of thing is going on. But I'd like to say that yes, we are going to face the problem from these two parts of the Taliban that are slaves of the Pakistan military, because the Pakistan military is obsessed with India. One part that is completely with China also will create problems for us, because the Chinese want to create problems for us. So we do have a problem, but I can assure you, I am very certain our armed forces can deal with it. I know the Indian armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard,
No,
etc.,
we are not
etc.
on that. We are not on that. There's nobody has ever questioned the Indian army, so don't bring that issue in. I am saying that Taliban is also has associates like ISIS, and they could. You mean say they won't come into Kashmir? You're saying that they'll be so busy with other things that we are not going to have a problem, and we can be sure that if they do, our army, the issue is not our army will not win. Of course, the army is always won, but the fact is that what do we prepare for? That is the ramification that I'm asking you about.
Dr. Swamy, we prepare for the Khorasan project, in which large parts of India are included in Khorasan.
That's right. That's what I wanted you to say. You made out Khorasan is all got to do with Europe.
Radicalizing and creating hubs for supporting the Khorasan project with violence, with mayhem, with death, with destruction. We have to prepare for that. There's no question about it. We have to prepare not just Kashmir, but large parts of India are included in the map of this Khorasan. Let me tell you.
Okay, now if you permit me, I'd like to hand this over to Ramesh and his other two colleagues, and they want to ask you some questions. So over to Ramesh.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Thank you, MD. I have three questions, but I'm going to ask the first one and then have Arvind do it. And if we have time, I'll come back to the other ones. Quick thing. Is Pakistan's only objective with the Taliban? I mean, if Pakistan in the US, at least the intelligence community, is considered as the godfather of Taliban, essentially supplying arms, finance, whatnot, military, whatnot. So is Pakistan's objective with the Taliban only in Kashmir and India, or is it beyond that? Is it only terrorism / occupation, or is it also economic?
I'd like to say that one of the main points regarding Pakistan is the need to keep the Pashtun nationalism in check. They are very afraid of Pashtun nationalism because the
That was the second question.
the line is an absurd line. It should not have been there, and the Pashtun territories should be united. The Pashtun people deserve their freedom. They deserve self-determination, and the Pakistan military, which is a Potiawari military, is terrified of Pashtun nationalism, and that's why they're stoking religious extremism among a section of the Pashtuns. But the Pashtuns are overwhelmingly nationalist, and on both sides of this artificial and mythical Durand line. And I can tell you that is what they are the most scared of. If I were a general in the Pakistan army, I would be worried about the survival of this militarized state of Pakistan more than I'd be worried about anything else, I can tell you.
Right, because that was the second part of my question on that particular thing. I mean, are they afraid more of Pashtuns or Kashmir? So, but anyway, you answered that question. Is that also will it also impact Baluchis or no?
My point is very simple. For God's sake, stand by human rights. We have got so many statements that India, stands by human rights, human values, this, that. Statements mean nothing. I mean, let us say, for example, I am being tortured, let us say, by some extremist who's catching me, and then on the television screen is in front of me, and I watch some high official oh, we stand by human rights, we stand for human values, we are against torture. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I am being tortured. I want you to
Hmm.
come and rescue
Okay.
me. So the reality is we must give full scale assistance to all the people in Pakistan who want freedom from this
Okay.
iron grip of the military, which is draining the country's resources, draining its independence, and promoting extremism and exclusivism.
Thank you. So the second question was China. Okay, Arvindji, you can go ahead. Then I'll ask this question.
Okay, Professor Nalapat and Dr. Swamy, both you can address this question. In fact, I have a brief question, but before that, there is an observation. Why Modi and Doval are adopting a wait and watch strategy? This wait and watch strategy is because they are looking at the US. US is also adopting wait and watch strategy till the decision on Panjshir one day match is taken place, maybe 5 days. So it's a matter of few days. Once the Taliban gets defeated, or once the Northern Army gets defeated, US will take its stand. Number one. Number two, why is US striking ISK? US is striking ISK with a future strategy, and the future strategy is there are two types of terrorists. One is Taliban, one is ISK. ISK is more dangerous. That's the US painting. US painting ISK as more dangerous so that later on, if they have to adopt or recognize Taliban with comfort, they can do it after 15 days, 20 days. So my prediction is, maybe I'm not an expert in strategy, but my prediction is within this month, by the end of September, US will recognize Taliban and say Taliban has been attacked by the ISK or different groups of IS, and therefore to protect Taliban or to protect Afghanistan, these terrorist groups have to be dealt with. That is one, and then only India will take a stand. But my question is now, Dr. Swamy mentioned about Russia. He has been maintaining that Russia is a junior partner of China, and China is attacking India in different ways. Now the question is, Prime Minister Modi has had a 45-minute conversation with President Putin just 2 days back. And this conversation between Modi and Putin was naturally with an eye on the US, India-Russia relations and vis-a-vis Afghanistan. So, what do you think is the likely outcome after India takes a friendly approach to US and asks US and India has a treaty, defense treaty with the US, Russia. And therefore, if India takes a stand on Afghanistan, India would also like to persuade Putin to take a similar stand. Do you think it will happen?
Dr. Swamy, please.
Well, the question was addressed to both of us, but the one that he addressed to me, I just simply say this. First of all, we have no treaty with Russia. The treaty we had was with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is broken up into 16 countries, and Putin doesn't say that he's the residual of Soviet Union. He's not a communist. I mean, he's not a declared communist country. Russia is not a declared communist country. But I maintain, and I'm re-emphasizing, there's nothing that Russia can do which the Chinese don't want them to do. And there's nothing that Russia will do which the Chinese will want them to do. That is, if the Chinese want them to do something, they'll do something. They are so thoroughly compromised by the Chinese money that has come in when in the early stages of Putin, he was bankrupt, and Russia was in a terrible state. So the question was, if Modi has had a 45-minute discussion with Putin, it will be taped and handed over to the Chinese. So we have to deal with the Chinese question. There's no use talking about Russia. It's, in my opinion, not even any use to talk about Taliban, because the Taliban delegation went to China 2 days before they took over, and they were feted. They were, treated royally, and they made a commitment that for the development of Afghanistan, the Taliban said, we will rely on you, that is the Chinese. And so the Chinese will use this facility plus the border road, or whatever that border roads, or whatever it is called, BRI. Everything the Chinese will get implemented, and in the process we are going to suffer in terms of the what happens in POK and what happens in our border.
Yeah, Arvind, Dr. Swamy, of course, has given a very important take on the whole thing. I only want to point out that this so-called drone strike against ISIS-K, for heaven's sake, there have been hundreds of drone strikes like this over the past several years. Drone strikes have taken place under Bush, under Obama, under Trump. Trump, for example, he dropped something called a daisy cutter bomb, a huge, the biggest bomb in the, almost with the same blast power as a nuclear bomb. And he dropped that in the middle of the ISIS-K so-called readout. Well, the reality is the Pakistanis would have given them alerted. So all that bomb did was kill some sheep and a smaller number of shepherds. I don't think anybody else was killed. I don't know if there are any actual ISIS-K people were killed, or whether some shepherds were killed, because unfortunately, and this has been happening. I mean, you had this WikiLeaks which brought out how so many of the so-called kills of terrorists of the US armed forces were actually civilians. And Julian Assange was sent to jail for telling the truth. I mean, the truth is something which I think, I don't see any reason to send a person to jail for that. If these people had listened to Julian Assange, they would not have been in this horrible position. What I want to say is no big deal, this kind of a drone strike. As for recognizing the Taliban, I'm not sure, because the United States is not China. In China, if General Secretary Xi Jinping decides on a policy, and he decided on a policy, full support to the Potiawari military of Pakistan, and that policy is China's policy. Nobody can question it. America, you can question it. You got the media, you got the multiple groups in your own party, you got opposition parties, you got other think tanks, all corporates, all kinds of interests working. So I think, frankly, public opinion is now understood that Biden has not only made a fool of himself, he has humiliated the United States and destroyed the confidence of people in the United States as comprehensively as Donald Trump. I mean, you had a commander-in-chief like Donald Trump, and now you have another commander-in-chief like Biden. So you have two commanders-in-chief who have completely destroyed the credibility of the United States as a security partner. Frankly, I mean, people who argue for a security relation to the United States, they don't know where to hide. I mean, people like me, for example, I don't know where to hide, because you've got two commanders-in-chief who are so completely incompetent. Trump, at least you can say, is ignorant. In the case of Biden, it's incredible, this level of incompetence. But the last thing about government policy, Arvind, you may be having a lot of contacts in government, and you may be knowing what government wants or what it does not want or anything. I don't know what's happening in government. So I don't know if their policy is to do nothing and wait, or to do something but not advertise it. I mean, so I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that it could be that they're doing something and not advertising it. So it could be that also. Because frankly, I have no information what's happening in government.
So, okay, Dr. Swamy, this again, it's for either of you. China, as soon as this Taliban, the pullout happened, China told, quote unquote, Taliban that you have to take a clean break from terror organization. Nobody knows what that means. China has never faced any terror threats like what India has faced terrorism per se, be it homegrown, outside, or even the Western countries. So is China playing with fire with the Taliban? Do you think that Xi Jinping can just say, hey, don't do this anymore? They would listen?
The Chinese public statements are not necessarily their private statements.
Okay.
They have an image to protect. And so they'll say this, but privately over dinner, they will say something else. I can't go by that. But there's no doubt that if Taliban comes to finally take control of the government in Kabul, Taliban would not like to be pushed by anybody. That includes the
Chinese
terrorist groups like the Haqqani group and the ISISK, etc. So to that extent, the Taliban will be assured that the Chinese would be on their side. The question basically is, where are the soft targets for the Taliban? You see, you have to see that too. And they are very strongly Islamic, and they certainly think that India is a country which deserves to be liberated and once again come under Islamic rule. So, and their writings, everything is there. So, I don't think we can take this lightly. I mean, it's possible that I'm now in a highly inflamed situation, and Nalapat is the sober analyst. But the fact is, we can't take a chance. We have to prepare for a major confrontation and war with Taliban. They will like to do it in Kashmir first. They will like to do it in terms of promoting terrorists. After all, IS has not been disowned by Taliban after what they did. 175 people were killed in the airport. They are innocent people, unarmed people, and they killed them. So I would say that we should be preparing very seriously, as seriously as the United States has to prepare, or even more, because the United States is far away. We are just next door.
Great. One more thing. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Andy.
To what Dr. Swamy was saying, don't forget that you have some hardened terrorists in Pakistan. And guess which country in the UN Security Council has been constantly blocking those terrorists from getting sanctioned?
China.
So, obviously, for the Chinese, terrorism against India is not terrorism. So, Chinese have adopted the Pakistan military's definition. It is terrorism against countries that we are fighting is not terrorism. But terrorism
Mohammed Azhar, whom we released after the Indian Airlines hijack, he has recently had a conversation with the ISS and the Taliban on what to do with India. Well, that came in the press.
And who protected him all this time? That very powerful country, China. So, Ramesh, the Chinese definition of terrorism is not your definition or my definition of terrorism.
Well, my point is, China has not faced terrorism. What if Taliban turns its face, or Pakistan turns towards China? That's my. We'll keep it for another day, maybe. The last point is about the CPEC, right? The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Is China going to extend that into Taliban and westwards? Is that a threat to Pakistan?
Dr. Swamy?
No, that's got nothing to do with Taliban in Afghanistan. In fact, Afghanistan would like to have a link into that for their own economic development. That's more. The question is whether the Iranians would be browned off. At the moment, the Iranians are with the Chinese and so on. But they are Shias, and they have already made a statement saying that the Shias should not be hurt in Afghanistan. So that's where the real question comes. And I don't think that China, you see, it doesn't go into depth on anything except their essentials. They want to be recognized as a friend in Afghanistan. They have achieved that with the Taliban now in power. And two, they want to sell, for which Taliban naturally needs support. The Taliban can give them, the Taliban can earn a lot of money through narcotics. In fact, most of Indian narcotics now comes from Afghanistan, has been coming for the last 10 years from Afghanistan. So, and then they've got these various special metals, which is available in Afghanistan plenty, which they want to use it for their war machine. The Chinese want to use. So, Chinese are going to go in that way. But if the Taliban attacks India, the Chinese are not going to tell them, no, don't do it. They are in fact going to enjoy watching it.
Okay, in
Maybe
the
they'll
last,
do their own act in other parts of India.
yeah, Dr. Swamy, as you alluded earlier, the Modi government is caught like a deer in headlights. Literally there. And Arvind said, we're going to wait and watch. What is this wait and watch? After they come inside your door? I mean, it's basically, there is a serious lack of foreign policy. I mean, whatever you want to call it, lack or ineptitude, that we just want to wait and watch, go cajole this person or cajole that person. I don't think that is the right strategy, because this is right at your doorstep. This is not some problem that's like thousands of miles away, or tens of thousands of miles away. And as you said, it's imminent. It's just a question of time. Are they going to focus today, tomorrow? But we don't have any policy, be it foreign or military, the Modi government, I'm saying when we say we, that how do we tackle this problem? So anyway, Mono, you wanted to say something? Go ahead, Doctor.
What happened to Jagdish? Is he still with us?
No, he's not available, Dr. Swamy. His connection is bad, so he's dropped
Okay,
off.
all right.
The Modi government, quite frankly, we don't know what it is thinking or what it is doing, because there's a very heavy cloak of secrecy. So I would like to hope, as a citizen of India, that there must be some policies that are active, and there must be some steps that are being taken to safeguard Indian interests. I would like to assume that.
So the last thing, you talked about Khorasan, Professor MD. Is the Khorasan initiative, it is a big threat to Iran. So if the Khorasan initiative gets into Taliban or something, isn't that a direct threat to Iran?
I'd like to say, Ramesh, I was very disappointed that this government stopped buying oil from Iran and basically fell at the feet of, I'm sorry to say,
America
behaved in an extremely foolish manner by scrapping the JCPOA, that Iran nuclear deal. It was a very good nuclear deal, frankly. And there are some people who believe that who forget that today's Europe and today's America is not the Europe and America of 1945 or 1925. It's a much weaker set of people. And they had delusions about forcing Iran to do this and that. Iran was never going to be forced to do this and that. My own guess is Iranians must be developing their nuclear deterrent very actively now, given what they have endured under Trump, and which is still being continued under Biden. JCPOA was a very good deal for the United States, for NATO, and for the GCC, and all these three people, if I may say so, they didn't realize it. So Iran, India, and Iran must go together. As far as Russia is concerned, I am very happy that discussions are going on with Vladimir Putin, because the reality is the Russians don't want to be perpetually, if I may say so, dependent on the Chinese. But so long as Biden called Putin a killer. Can you imagine the president of a country calling the president of another P5 country, which is a country with the second largest nuclear arsenal or the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, a killer? I mean, the poor man, Biden, I don't know what he is speaking, but this is one of the grave breaches of diplomatic protocol. So what option does Putin have except to go to Xi Jinping? The Europeans, the Germans, the French, the British, they don't want Putin anywhere in Europe because they feel that they'll be crowded out. And the fact is, Russia is a much bigger country than Germany, Britain, and France put together. They have to accept that. They will not accept that. So they have made Russia an enemy even after 1992, which is a ridiculous policy. And I do hope, as far as India is concerned, we need to work with Russia, because finally the Taliban is not good news for India, is not good news for Iran, is not good news for Russia. And one day these three countries must come together. I hope by that time the leadership of countries like the United States, UK, France, and Germany, they understand the situation and they don't act in this self-destructive manner that they have been acting over the last several years, if I may say so.
I have a brief question to both experts, Dr. Swamy as well as Professor Nalapat, about the role of the United Nations. In the first inning of Taliban in 1996, when they ousted Nazibullah, Nazibullah took refuge in the United Nations meeting for many months. And what happened yesterday? Yesterday in the Taliban 2.0, they had actually beaten the UN officers, and UN officers have run away from the building. Now, this is the changed situation of United Nations office in Afghanistan compared to 1996. So what do you think, why the United Nations is not playing any role at all?
So I'd like to give the last word, Dr. Swamy. So if I can interrupt here, Arvind, when Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt were having a discussion about tactics on Germany, I think Churchill mentioned that, well, now the Vatican has given a very strong statement in support of the Allies. Of course, there was a time when the Vatican was not giving any statement in support of the Allies. There was also a time when it was quite trying to work out a concordat with Hitler. But this statement, so what did Stalin say? Oh, the Vatican has given a statement. How many divisions does the Vatican have? So a very simple question. And the answer was 0. So very frankly, I mean, let's be, very honest. The question is, in the field, how effective you are in dealing with the situation. And if you're not effective in the field, you're not effective, period.
Arvind, you can conclude.
Okay, this is our second program on Afghanistan in the recent weeks. We had one with Professor Brahmachelani just 2 weeks back, and that time the situation was actually developing. And we cannot say the situation has developed now. Situation is still developing. In fact, the developments are taking by the hour. So the changes are taking place every hour, and we do not know what will happen, as Dr. Swamy said in the beginning of this program, that maybe we'll have to discuss this Afghanistan later also once new developments come in. But before I wind up this program, let me just ask a political question to Dr. Swamy. Congress is silent. NCP, Samajwadi Party, Mamata Party, DMK, all these parties are silent on Taliban. Are they looking at the Muslim population in India before they decide their stand? Why are they silent? Except you, nobody in BJP is also saying anything.
I know. Well, I have to give you a short answer because the long answer is very long. See, the question is, as far as Congress is concerned, I'm telling you from personal knowledge that Congress will never go against anything where the Chinese have taken a position. And this is a development after Sonia Gandhi's visit in 1995 to China. So even on Ladakh, I'm saying that they have come, Chinese have come and occupied. I mean, I'm supposed to be a friend of China. In fact, all these Gandabugs and the Andabugs keep calling me Chinese agent. I'm the only one who's speaking, saying that the Chinese have occupied our land, throw them out. Have you ever seen the Congress make any statement except to blame Modi? Saying that, what are you doing? Please tell us, what is your policy? They won't say, condemn China for having come and taken our territory, which was mutually agreed to be our territory across the LAC. So, as far as the Samajwadi Party and all, it's pure Muslim. Because Mulayam Singh told me many years ago, I think in 91, that with the other vote I can't win. I need the Muslims in my area. And and there the same thing with Mamata. I mean, why did she go to that extreme? She's a very good Hindu, big believer in, and she worships Durga Ma in the morning every day. I know it. But she says that, if they don't vote for me, they'll go to the CPM. That means the CPM will come back. So therefore, to avoid that, I have to go to this length. In practical terms, she doesn't do very much for them. But the fact is that her rhetoric is all extremely pro-Muslim because of the same reason. So we need to therefore consolidate Hindu vote, but we are losing it every day. In Uttarakhand, the Hindus are not going to vote for us now. after you took their temples. So let's be clear on these matters. Today is another discussion. What is it that you expect? Do you think that if you are becoming conciliatory to the Taliban, they're going to make friends with you? I mean, what kind of and the foreign minister says we are waiting and watching what? Somebody throws a grenade after pulling out the pin and you catch it. Then what you're going to do? Wait and watch to see what's going to happen. You will be blown up with it. So the issue is that this hope that somehow if India makes a gesture, they'll all come running to you. Nobody's going to come running to you. After all, foreign policy is made on the basis of national interests. What is the national interest you are serving by being nice to Taliban so that you can visit there and have exchange of ideas? So this is the issue which we have to come. We have to look at the fact that we are in this setup with the Chinese against you, the Afghanistan new government is going to be against you, Pakistan is against you. Many Muslim states do feel that Muslims are under threat in our own country. Even if our Muslims don't want them to speak for them, they continue to speak. We have to deal with that problem, and you have to have a clear policy, and that policy should be appealing to at least a large section of the population.
Arvind, before we conclude, just a quick update to you, to the viewers. This program is also available as a podcast on Anchor, on Spotify, on Google. So viewers can also search if you want to listen to a podcast. Go ahead, Arvind, we can conclude.
Thank you, Dr. Swamy, for providing that valuable answer about the internal politics or internal stand of the political parties in India, except BJP. In BJP, nobody would speak. Once Modi decides a policy, nobody has guts to speak anything except Dr. Swamy. And Dr. Swamy has made his stand very clear. And if Modi had listened to Dr. Swamy 4 years back, or even 1 year back, on Taliban, he has been very consistent in his stand. And viewers, please appreciate that the other political parties are totally silent, as I said, and Dr. Swamy provided an explanation. Thank you very much, Dr. Swamy. And thank you, Professor Nalapat. You covered everything possible under the topic. Taliban's stand vis-a-vis Europe or China or Russia or Indo-Russia relations, or all the topics that were required to gain knowledge on this issue. You have provided a valuable input. Thank you very much for the content that you provided. It was very rich content for our viewers' point of view. Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat, for having spared 90 minutes for this program. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Thank you, Ramesh. Thanks, Jagdish. Jagdish is not right now live on this program because of the connection. Thanks the technical team led by Ashish, Tejas, Tejas Navalgud, Ishwar Iyer, Gadgi Rakesh, Vishal Mehta, Swaminathan. Thank you, the entire technical team. We'll be meeting again next Sunday, 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, with a new topic, with a new guest, and Dr. Subramanian Swamy in 125th episode of Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga. 125वां अंक हमारा अगले रविवार को होगा. 125th episode is a celebration kind of thing for us. And Jagdish had given some figures before the program. Last week, it's crossed 150,000. I mean, the popularity of this program is immense.
Almost 170,000.
And it reaches nooks and corners of the world. And that shows about the value of this program, because not many independent forums are taking such issues and discussing threadbare. Thank you very much, all the guests, all the technical people, and viewers. Will be meeting again next Sunday. Till then, namaskar, Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.